Stop putting cream and sugar in your coffee and calling it a treat. What you're pouring into that mug every morning could either be quietly working against your blood vessels, or it could be one of the most powerful tools you have for staying vital, confident, and yes, sexually healthy well into your 80s. And most men never find out which, because their doctor has 7 minutes with them and a waiting room full of patients, not because the science isn't there. I've spent over 7 years in urology clinics, and I want to tell you something that might surprise you right out of the gate. A study conducted by researchers in Korea, published in the journal Andrology, pooled data from multiple clinical trials and found that a specific amino acid compound improved erectile function scores in men with mild dysfunction, with meaningful improvement showing up in a majority of participants within just 4 weeks. No prescription, no side effects beyond mild stomach upset in a small percentage of users. Just a compound your body already makes, given a boost. That's not a fringe theory. That's peer reviewed research sitting quietly in medical databases while men spend hundreds of dollars a month on pills that only treat the symptom, not the underlying plumbing problem. And here's the tease, because I don't want you clicking away in 20 minutes wondering why you wasted your time. Item number one on today's list is not some exotic root from the Amazon rainforest that costs $80 an ounce. It's something you can buy at any grocery store. It costs about 15 cents a serving. And I'm going to show you the exact way to stir it into your morning coffee so your body actually absorbs it instead of flushing it right through you. Stick around, because the order I'm counting down in isn't random, it's ranked by clinical impact. And by the time we get to number one, you'll understand why urologists who know this information tend to keep drinking their coffee black, with one very specific addition. Now, before we dive into the list, I want to ask you two things, because I genuinely read every single comment on these videos. And I mean that. First, tell me how old you are right now, today, in the comments. And second, tell me this: when was the last time you felt truly confident in the bedroom without worrying, without that background hum of anxiety? Was it last month, last year, or does it feel like a different lifetime? I ask because I want to understand who's actually watching this, and because so many of you have told me that just typing that answer out, admitting it, was the first step toward doing something about it. So don't be shy. Your comment might be the exact thing another man needed to read today. Alright, let's count it down. 5 items, least powerful to most powerful, and I promise you, by the time we hit number one, you'll wish someone had told you this decades ago. Number five is pomegranate juice, and I want to start here because it's the most misunderstood item on this list. Most men have heard the rumor that pomegranate juice is good for blood flow, but they don't know there's an actual randomized, placebo controlled, double blind crossover study behind it. Researchers affiliated with UCLA and a Beverly Hills urology clinic gave 53 men with mild to moderate erectile dysfunction either pomegranate juice or a placebo drink for 4 weeks, then switched them. So each man served as his own control. 47% of the men reported improved erections during the pomegranate phase, compared to only 32% during the placebo phase. That's a 15-point swing from a glass of juice. Here's why this matters specifically for aging bodies. Pomegranate is loaded with polyphenol antioxidants, and after the age of 60, your body's natural antioxidant defense system, the one that mops up cellular damage from oxidative stress, starts operating at a fraction of its former capacity. Think of oxidative stress like rust slowly forming on the inside of your pipes. Blood vessels, including the small, delicate ones responsible for erectile blood flow, are especially vulnerable to this rust like damage because they're thin walled and high traffic. Pomegranate's antioxidant compounds act like a chemical rust remover, protecting the lining of those vessels, called the endothelium. So, nitric oxide, the gas that actually triggers blood vessels to widen, can do its job without interference. For preparation, you want 8 ounces of 100% pomegranate juice. No added sugar, ideally in the morning on an empty stomach, so the polyphenols aren't competing with other food for absorption. If you can find pomegranate concentrate instead of juice, even better, because you get the polyphenol punch without the fruit sugar. As for a synergy tip, pair it with a small handful of walnuts. The healthy fats in walnuts actually help your body absorb the fat soluble portion of pomegranate's antioxidant compounds more efficiently, so you're not wasting half the benefit. I want to tell you about Robert, 74 years old from a small town outside Sacramento. Robert came to see me convinced his best years were behind him. He tried a well known blue pill and it worked, technically, but he hated how it made him feel headachy, flushed, anxious about timing everything around a pill. We talked about foundational changes instead of quick fixes, and pomegranate juice was one of the first things we added. 3 months later, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, Doc, I didn't need a miracle, I just needed my plumbing to work like it used to. That's the goal, not a magic trick. Restoration. Number 4 is Cocoa Flavanols, and this one has some of the most rigorous aging specific research behind it, coming out of Harvard Medical School and Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Researchers there gave a standardized flavanol rich cocoa beverage to both younger and older adults and measured blood vessel function before and after. What they found was remarkable. The improvement in blood vessel responsiveness was significantly more pronounced in the older participants than in the younger ones. Let me say that again, because it's counterintuitive. The older the subject, the bigger the benefit. A related study out of the same research group found that the nitric oxide dependent vascular effects of flavanol rich cocoa appeared to be greater specifically in older people, in whom endothelial function tends to be the most disturbed to begin with. Here's the aging mechanism behind this. As you cross your 60s and 70s, your endothelium, the paper thin inner lining of every blood vessel in your body, becomes progressively less efficient at producing nitric oxide on its own. Researchers sometimes call this endothelial senescence. And think of it like an old rusty water valve that used to turn smoothly and now needs extra torque just to open partway. Cocoa flavanols act almost like a lubricant on that valve, stimulating nitric oxide production through a completely different biochemical pathway than the one that naturally declines with age. That's why older vessels respond so dramatically, they have more room for improvement, and the flavanols are working around the blocked pathway rather than through it. For preparation, you want raw or minimally processed cocoa powder, not the sugary hot chocolate mix from the grocery store shelf, and not most standard chocolate bars, which lose the majority of their flavanol content during processing. 1 to 2 tablespoons of high flavanol cocoa powder stirred directly into your morning coffee gives you a mocha style drink and delivers somewhere in the range of 400 to 700 milligrams of flavanols, which is the dose used in the studies showing the strongest vascular benefit. As for synergy, pair your cocoa with a small amount of cinnamon. Beyond the flavor, cinnamon has its own modest circulation supporting properties, and it helps mask any bitterness so you'll actually stick with the habit daily instead of trying it once and forgetting about it. Before we move to numbers 3, 2, and 1, and trust me, the science gets even more compelling from here, I need to ask a favor. If you're finding this useful, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button right now. Here's why it genuinely matters beyond the algorithm talk you hear on every channel. When this video performs well, YouTube shows it to more men exactly like you. Men who are quietly searching for answers, but too proud or too private to ask their doctor directly. Your like might be the reason some other 78-year-old man finds this video at 2 in the morning when he's lying awake, worrying. So take 3 seconds, hit subscribe, and let's keep going. Number 3 is Korean Red Ginseng, and this is where the research starts getting seriously robust. A systematic review and meta-analysis published examining randomized controlled trials of red ginseng for erectile dysfunction pooled data from roughly 350 men across 6 separate trials. The results showed a risk ratio of 2.4, meaning men taking red ginseng were roughly 2.5 times more likely to report improved erectile function. Compared to men taking a placebo, a statistically significant finding with a fairly tight confidence interval, which in research terms means the reviewers were quite confident this wasn't just chance. Why does this work specifically in aging bodies? Red ginseng contains compounds called ginsenosides, and these appear to work through two separate mechanisms that become increasingly relevant as we age. First, similar to the other items on this list, ginsenosides support nitric oxide production in vascular tissue. But second, and this is the part most videos on this topic completely ignore, ginseng appears to have an effect on the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, essentially the stress hormone control center in your brain. After the age of 65, cortisol regulation becomes less efficient, and chronically elevated stress hormones actively suppress the same nitric oxide pathways we've been talking about all video. Think of chronic stress like a foot pressing down on the brake pedal while you're also trying to press the gas. Ginseng seems to ease off that brake pedal a little, which is a benefit no amount of nitric oxide boosting alone can achieve. For preparation and dosing, most of the successful clinical trials used somewhere between 600 milligrams and 1000 milligrams of standardized Korean Red Ginseng extract daily, typically split into two doses, one in the morning and one in the early afternoon. Since ginseng can be mildly stimulating and taking it too late in the day may interfere with sleep, powdered red ginseng extract dissolves reasonably well into coffee, though the taste is earthy and slightly bitter. So start with a small amount and adjust to your preference. For synergy, pair red ginseng with a source of vitamin C, like a small glass of orange juice on the side, because vitamin C appears to enhance the absorption of ginsenosides in the digestive tract. I want to tell you about Harold, 81 years old, a retired school teacher from a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Harold's wife actually booked his first appointment with me because he'd essentially given up, told her that some things just stop working after 80 and that's that. I hear this defeatist attitude constantly, and it breaks my heart every time because it's simply not true for most men. We started Harold on a red ginseng protocol alongside some of the other habits on this list, and about 6 weeks in, his wife sent me an email. Not Harold, his wife, thanking me and saying their marriage felt young again. Harold is proof that 81 is not a wall, it's just a number. Number two is dietary nitrate from beetroot. And this is where things get genuinely exciting from a research standpoint. Because unlike some of the other items, this one was studied in older men specifically. Researchers had 15 healthy older men, average age 69, consume concentrated beetroot juice containing about 800 milligrams of nitrate in a randomized, double blind, crossover design. Within 2.5 hours, the men showed a measurable improvement in flow mediated dilation of the femoral artery, which is essentially a direct measurement of how well a blood vessel widens in response to increased blood flow demand, a very close cousin to the mechanism behind erectile function. Here's why this matters so profoundly for men over 70. After the age of 75, your body's ability to convert dietary sources into usable nitric oxide through the traditional pathway, the one involving an amino acid called L-arginine, drops by a substantial margin, often cited in the research as somewhere around a 30 to 40% reduction in efficiency. But beetroot nitrate works through a completely separate backup pathway. Your oral bacteria convert the nitrate into nitrite, which your body then converts into nitric oxide, bypassing the aging, sluggish arginine pathway entirely. Think of it like your house losing power and a generator kicking in through an entirely different fuel source. The lights still come on, they're just powered differently. For preparation, concentrated beetroot juice shots, the kind sold in small 60 to 70 milliliter bottles at health food stores, are the most convenient and consistent dosing method, typically delivering around 6 to 800 milligrams of nitrate per bottle. Timing matters here, more than almost anything else on this list, because the conversion process through your oral bacteria takes roughly 2 to 3 hours to peak. So if you're planning intimacy in the evening, that morning coffee timing becomes strategically important. As for adding it to coffee specifically, beetroot powder, not the juice, blends into coffee reasonably well and doesn't curdle the way some assume it will. Start with half a teaspoon and work up gradually, since digestive tolerance varies. For synergy, avoid using antibacterial mouthwash within an hour of consuming beetroot, because those oral bacteria performing the nitrate to nitrite conversion are essential to the entire process, and killing them off defeats the purpose. Now we've arrived at number one, the item I teased at the very beginning, and I promise it lives up to the wait. Number one is L-Citrulline, and if you remember only one thing from this entire video, let it be this name. The clinical evidence here is the strongest and most direct of anything we've discussed today. In a randomized, double blind, placebo controlled pilot study, researchers gave men with mild erectile dysfunction 1.5 grams of L citrulline daily for 1 month. And compared to the placebo group, these men showed a significant improvement in what's called the erection hardness score, a validated clinical measurement tool. A separate trial combined L-citrulline with L-arginine over 4 weeks in men with documented endothelial dysfunction and found enhanced nitric oxide production, confirmed through blood testing, alongside noticeable improvement in International Index of Erectile Function scores, which is essentially the gold standard questionnaire urologists use to measure erectile health. And a systematic review pooling multiple smaller trials found consistent benefit across the board, with good tolerability and only mild occasional digestive symptoms in a small subset of users. Here's why L-citrulline earns the top spot, and it comes down to a concept called anabolic resistance, something every man over 60 needs to understand. As we age, our bodies become progressively less efficient at converting the raw materials we consume into the actual compounds we need, whether that's protein into muscle or, in this case, dietary compounds into nitric oxide. Your body can technically produce nitric oxide from the amino acid arginine. But here's the catch: most dietary arginine gets broken down and destroyed in your liver and intestines before it ever reaches your bloodstream, a phenomenon researchers call first pass metabolism. L-citrulline sidesteps this entirely. Think of arginine like a delivery truck that has to pass through 6 different toll booths, each one skimming off part of the cargo, so only a fraction of what you loaded actually arrives. L-citrulline is like a delivery drone that flies straight over all those toll booths, converting to arginine directly in your kidneys, well past the point where the liver can intercept and destroy it. That's why, gram for gram, L-citrulline produces more usable nitric oxide in your bloodstream than arginine itself does, and why it becomes disproportionately more valuable the older you get and the more anabolic resistance your body has accumulated. For preparation and dosing, the clinically studied range runs from 1.5 grams up to about 3 grams daily, typically as a flavorless or citrus flavored powder that dissolves completely and invisibly into hot liquid, which is precisely why it pairs so well with coffee. Stir it directly into your morning cup, and because it's water soluble and heat stable, it doesn't degrade or clump the way some supplements do. Consistency matters more than perfect timing here, since nitric oxide pathway improvements build over roughly 2 to 4 weeks of daily use, rather than delivering an immediate one time effect, though some men do report a noticeable difference within the same day. For synergy, and this is the combination I most often recommend, pair your L-citrulline coffee with a small piece of dark chocolate, containing at least 70% cacao. You're essentially stacking 2 different nitric oxide pathways at once: the citrulline to arginine conversion and the flavanol driven pathway we discussed earlier, working through 2 separate biochemical routes toward the same destination. I want to tell you about Walter, 83 years old, from a lakeside town in northern Michigan, because his story is the reason I make these videos in the first place. Walter had been divorced for years, widowed once, and had recently started dating again after his daughter encouraged him to try. He came to my office nervous, almost embarrassed, convinced that at 83 the conversation about intimacy was simply over for him. We built a simple morning routine around L-citrulline in his coffee, added some of the other habits from this list, and gave it 6 weeks. When Walter came back for his follow up, he wasn't the same man who'd walked in nervous and defeated. He told me he'd started seeing someone, that things were going well, and that for the first time in years, he felt like himself again, not like a man waiting around for his body to fail him. He said something I now repeat to nearly every patient his age. He said, I thought this part of my life was a closed chapter. Turns out I just hadn't turned the page yet. One quick note before we close, because I take this seriously. If you're currently taking nitrate medication for heart disease or chest pain, or if you're on blood pressure medication, please talk to your doctor before adding concentrated nitrate sources like beetroot into your routine, since combining certain nitric oxide boosting compounds with those specific medications can cause blood pressure to drop too low. And more broadly, if erectile difficulty has come on suddenly or is accompanied by chest pain, unusual fatigue, or leg swelling, please get evaluated promptly because erectile dysfunction can sometimes be one of the earliest warning signs of cardiovascular disease showing up years before a heart attack does. Everything on today's list is meant to support a body that's already being properly cared for by a physician, not to replace that care, place that. All the studies I referenced today are linked in the description below so you can read them yourself and bring them to your own doctor if you'd like. Here's what I want to leave you with today. So much of what we're told about aging, especially when it comes to intimacy, is fatalistic, as though your body simply signs a contract at some arbitrary age and there's nothing left to negotiate. I have watched hundreds of men in their 70s, 80s, and beyond discover that this simply isn't true. That small, consistent, evidence based changes can restore something they thought was permanently gone. This isn't really about erections, not fully, it's about independence. It's about walking into a room and feeling like the same confident man you've always been. It's about intimacy with a partner you love and connection and quality of life that doesn't quietly shrink year after year just because a calendar says you're supposed to slow down. It is genuinely never too late to reclaim this part of your life. And I mean that with everything I've learned across 30 years of practicing medicine. If this video helped you even a little, please subscribe because I have so much more of this kind of research packed content coming, and I want you to be here for it. And before you go, I want to know out of everything we covered today, pomegranate, cocoa, red ginseng, beetroot, or L-Citrulline, which one are you going to try first? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll see you in the next video.